Swim check 1, 2. Bike check 1, 2. Run check 1, 2. I think we're ready. Let's try this. Welcome to the Try Beginner's Luck podcast, a podcast where we explore the sport of triathlon from a variety of perspectives to help beginner triathletes on their journey. I am your host, Mashonda Shines. Happy New Year. Yes, yes, yes. We are in 2022. I know everyone is like, whew, we made it. Yes, we did. And Try Beginners Luck is in its second season. I could not be more thrilled. Yes, thrilled is my word for this season. Last season, it was excited. Every time I was like, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited. But this time I am thrilled, which is a little bit of a notch up from excited. Thank you so much to all of you who have been so supportive and listening to our first season. We're now in season 2, so we're adding a component. Yes, we are going to add video for those of you who are out there in YouTube and want to see us. You can now do that. So I am just so grateful to be growing as I am literally still trying beginner's luck. I feel like I'm still learning how to edit, how to talk, just how to just be, and thinking of ways to bring some amazing guests to you. Now, today, I have someone with me that I just kind of learned about within the last 2 to 3 years. I first started using this product and was like, oh, I have been doing triathlons for 7 years. Started using this product within my 6th year. I'm now in my 8th year. So yeah, I've been using TrainingPeaks for 2 years. TrainingPeaks is what I'm talking about. And who knew you could get so compulsive with making sure that you get all green? Listen, if I get an orange or a yellow, I am like freaking out, and better not get a red, okay? Because it's like, oh, you didn't do something correctly. But it keeps me on target, and it keeps so many of us athletes on target. And for those of you who are beginners, you're about to find out everything you need to know about TrainingPeaks. But first, I get to bring up the co-founder and chief evangelist, I absolutely love that word, of TrainingPeaks. TrainingPeaks follows the philosophy that there is a right way to go about training, and that is deliberate practice. That's deliberate practice that gives you green if you complete everything, yellow if you fall short a little bit, orange if you go over a little bit, and you just get a red if you just don't do it at all. But trust me, you will start getting into it. So today, I have none other than the co-founder and chief evangelist of TrainingPeaks. Yes, TrainingPeaks follows the philosophy that there is a right way to go about training, and that's deliberate practice. That starts with setting a goal, getting expert instruction, performing purposeful training, and lastly, getting immediate feedback. I don't know about you, but I absolutely love when I write a comment and my coach sends me immediate feedback because that helps me as I grow. I just want to go ahead and bring in Mr. Dirk Friel. Dirk, welcome to Try Beginner's Luck and Happy New Year.
Hey, you too. Thanks a lot for having me on, Mashonda. Happy New Year, and glad we made it this far.
Come on.
It's been a tough couple of years, but it's all up from here.
It has to be. It has to be. Well, one, I am just so grateful to have you. And again, like I said, I am thrilled, thrilled, thrilled. I remember my first time getting to talk to you was with USA Triathlon, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access Summit. And I was a beginner with TrainingPeaks. And I was just like, you created all of this? Thank you so much. I've grown significantly using TrainingPeaks. And I just want to jump right in for those who are new to triathlons. They're thinking about starting their journey to triathlons. What is TrainingPeaks for those who may not know?
Wow, TrainingPeaks is a whole lot of things, but really at the end of the day, as you mentioned, we're about deliberate practice. We want folks to get proper advice, proper expert instruction. Everybody deserves a coach is really, our mantra. So we service the coaches, help them build their businesses, and we help athletes really grow within the sport, not only triathlon, but really any endurance sport. So I like to say we help track, analyze, and plan all aspects aspects of your training. And hopefully you're doing that with an expert. And yeah, and coaching, and coaching services, there's a wide variety of options out there, from your basic training plan that might be free or $20 for 8 weeks, all the way up to personal one-on-one coaching, which will always be the best option. So we kind of service a broad spectrum of coaching services on behalf of our coach customers.
I love that. Track, analyze, and plan.
Yeah.
Hmm, that's an acronym for TAP. We're helping you tap into your best and greatest potential. I love it.
Yeah.
So, how did you even think to come up with Training Peaks?
Yeah, well, it wasn't too hard because it was an absolute necessity that I needed. I was coaching in the mid 90s with my father, Joe Friel. So a lot of people might know his name. He's a pretty well-known author. He wrote the Triathlete's Training Bible and Fast After 50 and Beginner's Triathlon Guide and Training the Power and all kinds of the Power Meter Handbook. So he's probably got 15 books out there, and many are in, being updated all the time. So I was coaching with him. I was coaching cyclists. He was coaching really mainly triathletes, but also cyclists and runners. And, in the mid 90s, the internet wasn't a huge thing yet. And so we were relying on the fax machine and email attachments.
Wow.
So for one client, I might have an Excel spreadsheet. I might have their fax, paper of, their workouts and how they felt. And they may have also emailed me a polar heart rate file, or at that time, an SRM power meter, .srm file. So I just had data fragmented all over the place for every single client. And I knew that, this internet thing had some benefits to it. So I envisioned having one kind of portal, if you will, for the coach and athlete, and we could access all the data anytime from any computer in the world. And obviously back then, nobody was using their phones to access the internet. It was all through these big, huge desktop machines. But I knew no matter, if we could get to that point, it would really help us deliver a better quality service to our athletes. So it started out with an internal project in our coaching business. And that business at the time was called UltraFit. And then that started in 1999. I started with my father and a best man at my wedding. Actually, he was the only web developer I knew in the entire world. And so we basically stayed up late at night, and, he had a day job and I was still racing professionally and coaching. And we kind of got it up and off the ground in 99, started using it in 2000 with about 30 clients of ours. And then quickly realized other coaches really wanted to use the same system. There was no other system out there at the time. So we started helping other coaches out, and giving them access. They would pay us on the back end. And all of a sudden we now had a software business, and we never even planned on building a software business. So we separated the books, got a separate bank account, separate LLC, all of that. And really from that day forward, I spent more and more time on the TrainingPeaks side of it. And I started to coach less and less. And now I don't coach at all right now. I really look at myself as trying to help other coaches, build their businesses and helping people achieve their potential. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it started, as just an immediate need that I had as a coach in 1999.
Isn't that how all great businesses start? It starts with a need. You're fulfilling a need. And now you have dominant market share in this area because of your vision and that necessity that brought about it. So thank you so much for helping. I know myself and thousands upon thousands of athletes, realize their potential and maximize it and exceed even their wildest expectations of what their coaches have set for them. So
Yeah, well, thanks. I think it's like, authenticity really from the beginning, and really from the beginning until today, we're doing the very same thing. Always had that focus on expert instruction and coaching. So, and what's funny is looking back, there was no business plan. We didn't raise money, it we didn't have any debt. It was just sweat equity, which is, fewer and fewer companies these days are built with, or if you think about software companies, fewer and fewer software companies are being built with true sweat equity. And when we saw a dollar come in, we would spend 80 cents and keep 20 cents for ourselves. And that was really the philosophy all the way through, really up until today. It's really kind of the DNA that we're built on. So yeah, thank you so much.
That sweat equity, I don't think anything can match sweat equity on any day.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we're talking about it from a business perspective, but really, even if we translate that into, athletics or just work, when you put in the sweat, it means a little something different, and it holds a different set of values, for you, and you treat it differently, you value it differently. So I
Yeah.
don't think anything can beat that sweat equity.
Not a whole lot of waste, along the way, right? And my father also says, he says, do the least amount of the most specific training at the right time. And I think that was, again, like relating that to business, it's kind of the same thing. When you don't have $20 million sitting in the bank, waiting to be spent to build some dream. No, you have your sweat equity and you're doing the least amount and the most specific at the right time because you don't want to waste any moment. So I think the two really relate, in terms of smart training as well as smart business.
My heart is full right now because I really feel like I'm in that sweat equity mode, like just doing it from the ground up, not knowing
Yeah,
what I'm doing, just, hey, I
right.
have this idea. Hey, Maria, will you help me? Hey, Sarah, will you help me? And,
Yeah.
you just start there. And so thank you. This is starting my new year off really good. Is just knowing that, sometimes you have the resources to start it. And for those of them, for those who have that, cool. But for those who are just starting with that sweat equity, that's cool too, because you also too can be successful. So that's making my heart have all the warm and fuzzies today. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay. So you mentioned your dad, and of course, the legacy that he has imprinted in the multi-sport space. But I want to even go back to the beginning. Tell me about your multi-sport journey and how did it even grow?
Hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, if we can go down both paths, we know the business side of the multi-sport journey and then my own personal multi-sport kind of experience. And on the business side, certainly, the triathlon was growing in momentum. My father actually had a triathlon store in the 80s. And it was, as far as we know, it was the very first triathlon store ever. He actually had a running store. It was called Foot of the Rockies in Fort Collins. And next
Wow.
door was a bike shop. And he ended up buying the bike shop, tore down the wall in between, and he created Foot of the Rockies, which is a triathlon store. And he brought in, swim gear, et cetera. But it didn't survive, didn't last. It was ahead of its time. But that passion was kind of within my family, and my parents did triathlons. I started training for a triathlon when I was a teenager, but cycling is really, when I was about 13 years old, cycling is what really got me going. I just loved riding the bike. Later on, I became a professional cyclist and I moved to Europe. I moved to Belgium when I was 19 and I stayed for 5 years. I basically dropped out of college and just, moved to Europe and made a go of it. And I ended up being professional cyclist for 12 years. I retired in 2002. And then in 2005, I still had quite a bit of fitness in me. And I had this one goal, which was a bucket list, and that was to do an Ironman. So I signed up without really telling anybody because my family, we had a trip to South Africa planned. And I thought, wow, it was actually around Ironman South Africa. We were going for this business trip. My father was speaking before the race. So I was like, wow, what if I register and get in and don't really tell anybody and then kind of spring it on them? And I just didn't want to have all that extra pressure. I just kind of wanted to be a personal journey. So I registered, got in, started training and, finished it. And my goal was to finish under 11 hours. And I did 10 hours and 45 minutes. I was super happy with it. I actually negative split the marathon. It was a 3-lap race on the marathon. and my last lap was the fastest by 7 minutes. So I was kind of holding that back a lot throughout the race. Got through it, totally fine. But as my dad says, I did 2 Ironmans in the same day. I did my first and my last. And really, it wasn't because it was some horrible experience. It was literally like if you went to Africa and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. That is like the mentality I had. Like, I got to the top, I reached my goal, and it just was released, and I don't really need to do that anymore. But I'm really proud of having that experience. It taught me a lot about nutrition and pacing, which was not really a big part of cycling, pro cycling. Pacing is not really a part of being in a 200-man field, racing 80 miles or whatever. So it gave me a new perspective, and also perspective, from a lot of triathletes we work with, right? So yeah, it was a great experience. I haven't done one since, and I'm still enjoying cycling and skiing and all kinds of other endurance sports. Or I basically just don't, I run, but I really don't swim anymore.
Wow. That is so much to unpack. The fact that your dad had one of the first triathlon stores just
Yeah.
saying, hey, we're going to make this happen. And you somehow tricking them on a family vacation and doing a triathlon. So I have to ask, your dad didn't coach you. So did you have a triathlon coach to train for your first Ironman?
I think my dad and I, we bounce a lot of ideas off each other. We kind of self-experiment. So I certainly was working with my dad through that experience. But it's funny, I only had 3 months. I really only trained 3 months for it. I had, great fitness from cycling. The bike was going to be no problem at all. The run, I just kind of, I didn't, I didn't run more than 2 hours within a training session. Number one thing is I didn't want to get injured leading into the race. That was the number one thing, not showing up with any injuries and being fresh on the start line. But at that time, we definitely believed a lot in strength training. So I spoke to my dad a lot about the strength training component and how that might help me last within the marathon and not break down as much. So we worked a lot on the strength component. And I just got in the pool and just swam. I just knew I just needed time in the water. So I
Wow.
definitely worked out a lot of ideas with my dad, and we bounced ideas back and forth for sure.
I love the fact that you guys bounced ideas, and I'm surprised he didn't get a hunch that you were doing this.
Well, I told him, after I registered, and then it was all planned out. So 3 months out, he knew,
Okay.
but it was kind of, that's still, for telling people you're doing Ironman, that's still a pretty short time
Oh,
frame.
for sure. For sure. So, because I'm curious, and let me know if you can remember this, because you are this amazing pro cyclist, what was your bike time? And did you beat some of the
Oh,
pros in the field that day on the cycle, on the
yeah,
bike?
I can't remember my exact bike time, but I have some funny stories. So I was obviously slow in the swim, but there was this pro triathlete from Boulder, and I can't remember her name, but it was funny. I saw her at registration, and it was something, I said something like, I'll see you on the bike. And she's like, yeah, I'll see you on the run. So that exactly played out. So she was way ahead of me in the swim. I caught her on the bike. I came into the bike like 20th or something, overall, like just at the end of like the pro field. And then I waddled out of transition. I was in transition by myself. I never envisioned that. Like, I thought it'd be chaotic and everything, but it was like everybody was focused on me. So it was like, whoa, this is strange. And then I just like kind of walked out of transition and started the run, like barely running, just kind of jogging. And then here she came, probably only like 2 miles into it. She patted me on the back, was like, see you later. So yeah, that's how it went. But yeah, I definitely had a good bike experience. It was a hilly course. It was very windy. Port Elizabeth is where it was held. And so it was very rough water. that was scary. And the wind was, if you weren't comfortable on the bike. So for me, I wanted it to be windier. I wanted more hills. I wanted a very hard bike, which would give me a better, advantage in the end. So yeah, that's how it played out. So it was funny.
I absolutely love it. You're like, hey, I'll see you on the bike and then I'll see you on
Yep.
the run. But I bet
Yeah.
that her patting you on your back kind of made you a bit upset. Like, seriously, Chick, you pat me on my back.
I know. Don't make it look so easy.
Right.
But that's
Right.
that's happened to all of us, right? There's always somebody better than you. So you have to have that humility because there's always someone faster than you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned something that was really key in comparison to being a cyclist, and that is pacing and nutrition. I think
Mm.
that's important uh, to kind of differentiate and talk about that just a little bit if you can.
Pacing and nutrition. Well, obviously nutrition in triathlon, especially Ironman, the longer you go, that's the fourth discipline nutrition becomes. So, getting that nutrition plan down, but if you go too fast, the nutrition plan goes out the window. Your gut shuts down, you can't process, um, you know, osmolality is all messed up, fluids are going the wrong way in the gut. If you overeat, that's where the problems in gut problems, begin. So it's really that balance between maintaining a pace where you can maintain the fueling nutrition strategy. And that takes practice. I mean, I do that within a different sport I'm involved with, which is ski mountaineering. But my longest race of the year is about 6.5 hours. So it's somewhat like a half Ironman, a little longer. And I'm really trying to keep to a strategy of certain number of grams an hour. So, and if I go, I know for me, like personally, if I'm not going over 150 heart rate an hour, that's too fast. That's too high of an intensity. My threshold is probably just below 160. So I need to maintain more in the high 140s. That's personally myself. If I'm doing a 6.5 hour race, I'm probably going to average about around 150 heart rate if I do it well. And that allows me to still maintain my fueling strategy. But that takes practice. You got to do that, I think at least once or twice a week, almost year round. You need to have some emphasis, like a focused emphasis in the workout of this is my fueling strategy for today's workout. And see, you just got to work it out through practice.
I love that. I think that that is so smart. And the more you practice it, it's kind of like what you said, that deliberate practice and what Training Peaks is founded on. It's like that deliberate practice to get down your fueling, to get down your pacing. That is
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where we get into, I think, more of the nuancing of who you are as a professional cyclist.
Mm.
And biking being one of those areas in which it's really hard because it's the longest discipline in a triathlon. What would you tell someone who's just beginning how to really make that crossover and becoming the best cyclist that they can be so that they can be the best triathlete they need to be?
Yeah. Pacing is so, so, so important. I mean, I've been to maybe 14 Ironman Hawaii World Championships, obviously as a spectator and working at the event. But I like to go with my father to, it's like mile 3 or 4 on the bike. And there's a little hill there that they go up. And it's amazing how many of the athletes are going way too hard. They're completely anaerobic, and they really need to learn how to hold back early in the bike, and that's so hard to do. So I think the number one thing for learning to have a better bike split is learning that pacing strategy. And unfortunately, heart rate is not a great gauge of that, especially the first 10 miles or so. If your heart rate's still kind of catching up, if you will. I mean, 10 minutes into the bike, your heart rate's still kind of ramping up. A power meter really is the best gauge. The best pacing strategy would be to leverage a power meter and to sort of have a governor and say, I don't want to go over this, this power value, and really kind of stick to the strategy. So in a way, using a power meter is kind of like cheating. If you really can work it out with a coach, what the pacing plan should be on the bike, and you're sticking to that with a power meter, that means you'll exit the bike with plenty of energy to have a good run. You're not out there to have the fastest bike possible. You're out there to get through the bike with a good balance of energy so that you can have a really good run off of the bike. So I think the number one thing is really pacing and not going out too hard, or where you encounter hills, not to go too hard on the hills. And then once you get fairly proficient, at the bike, and you're figuring out the pacing, then aerodynamics really starts to play a bigger role. Can you first stay in the aero position for that many hours? That's a really hard thing to do. You got to work on that in training. And the shape of your helmet really doesn't matter until you can actually stay in the aero position for that many hours. That's the number one thing. Can you stay in the position? And then after that, start thinking about spending more money on the gear to shave off, aerodynamic drag. So that's probably where I'd focus, with the nutrition strategy, baked into all that.
I think that it's so cool that you basically said heart rate isn't the best judge of character, especially in the first 10 miles, but having a power meter is. I would like for us to break that down just a little bit,
Yeah.
especially for those who perhaps might be heart rate training only because they can't afford a power meter.
Yeah.
These are beginners. So how would you tell someone to adjust their heart rate? Because I'm sure being a cyclist, you have to know how to bring your heart rate down to kind of get into a zone. How would you tell them to kind of adjust their heart rate if they're trying to do it that way?
Well, yeah, if you go out hard, if you do a hard 5-minute effort, your heart rate is still ramping up. And so you won't feel that effect until later. 5 minutes later is when you're really going to feel that first 5 minutes, because the heart rate was ramping up to catch up with the effort. But wattage is immediate. You would see that immediately. That's why I say the power meter is the best gauge of the intensity. So really, I think, going off RPE is probably like a better strategy. You need to always have more in the tank. You could be doing more. So, if you're going out at a level 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, and you're keeping it at a 5 or 6 or less, even, it's better to go out on a scale of 1 to 10. It's better to go out at a level 4 than to go out at a level 8. So that internal pacing clock and internal kind of pacing rate of perceived exertion becomes really, really important to train that. And so, if you can do more half Ironmans or to gain experience, that would help a lot. So I think, yeah, heart rate is still catching up with the effort, the first 5 or so minutes of the race. So you're really going out with that rate of perceived exertion and keeping it at a level 5 and just really holding back and having a smile on your face. That's like a really good sign. You're not struggling to talk.
I love that whole smile on your face. I'm all about smiling on your face while you're running or you're working out or just racing. That makes a difference. However, you are just really dropping some serious gems here, because I'm sitting up here like sitting at your feet like, seriously, is this real? You mentioned something about 5 minutes. Like if you're going hard, 5 minutes, it's a catch up type thing. So you may
Yeah.
not feel it until 5 or 10 minutes down the road. What is that like? And how can that be detrimental to a race, especially for someone who's just starting out?
Yeah, well, if you look at a power file, let's say the race is perfectly flat and straight and the same wind the entire race. Ideally, you would then want to have, really the same pacing strategy throughout. So the more you tap into your higher intensity levels and go into threshold or above threshold, you burn exponentially more energy. You're gonna strip your muscles of glycogen, store glycogen, right? So ideally, you want to maintain a kind of a steady fuel output throughout the race, so that you can stay on top of refueling, so that you can start the run, strong. So again, the more you go into the red, the more spikes you have in the power file, the so much more energy is going to be wasted. Actual fuel in your muscles will be taken away that you could have leveraged later in the race. So having that smooth power output is really more about managing your fuel expenditure. So going into the red has major consequences to your pacing later in the race.
Okay, so I want to tie in TrainingPeaks now. So how can the use of TrainingPeaks data help a beginner tie in their RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion, to their heart rate?
Yeah, well, on another little topic, if you had a power meter, you would be looking, I'm explaining variability index is really what I'm explaining.
Okay.
So the closer it's VI is the data field within TrainingPeaks. And the smoother you are, the closer that value is to 1.0. So a race that's very close to 1.0 would be a better way to manage a race pace than having a really up and down race that's somewhere above 1.0. So that's the technical terms when you're talking power meter. And it's really looking at normalized power versus average power is kind of what that's all doing. But rate of perceived exertion versus heart rate, certainly I feel like rate of perceived exertion almost is somewhat more important, right? Because if you do encounter a short hill and the hill might only take you 90 seconds or 2 minutes, your heart rate will not reflect that effort until after you're over the hill, you're going downhill. And oftentimes you're going downhill and your heart rate's still going up. Even though you're coasting, your heart rate will still be going up because it's catching up with the effort you just did on that last hill. So therefore, rate of perceived exertion is the better. If you don't have power, still, even with power, rate of perceived exertion is so important to hold back the reins, stay within your comfort zone, and not waste a whole lot of energy on that 90-second climb, because there might be 15 more of them coming up. If you're in, I think Ironman Wisconsin, has a lot of little hills like that, and that would be very detrimental to go above threshold for 50 times within an Ironman leg. So that training of that internal pacing, rate of perceived exertion, is very, very important. And so working with the coach and going out and training and having the coach and review the file afterwards and showing you like, here, how did you feel here? This is what your heart rate did. This is what your power did. And this is maybe where you went too hard. And so let's try and back that off. That becomes really important.
Wow, that is a perfect segue. But I just want to kind of recap. For those of you who are listening to this, whether you have been doing triathlons for years or just getting into the sport, invest in a power meter. A power meter will help you, quote unquote, allow you to get an advantage. So if Santa didn't bring you one, for Christmas, it's a new year with new goals and a new opportunity to get you a power meter, and also TrainingPeaks, which will help you be able to analyze the data and be able to see where your strengths are, where you're expending too much energy. So those are two things on our 2022 list that we need to invest in. Okay.
And I think they start around 400. I think, the lower price one's probably around 400 or so dollars, like one side, like you don't need right and left, just, get one side left power meter, and that'll go a long ways. And then read a good book about it, and work with and even get a consultation with a coach. If you don't hire a coach full time, spend an hour with a coach, and when you do, maybe have a couple weeks worth of training data that you could actually sit down with a coach and they could go through it. And there's some big tidbits that I'm sure a qualified coach can give you some great tips immediately by just looking at your training data.
That's really good that you say you are about to go into more descriptives about the power meter. And to button this up, if a person can't get a dual power meter, it is completely okay to get a one-sided power meter.
Absolutely. I mean, you're going to have differences between right and left. And you might say, well, it's not an absolute perfect measurement of what the watt is, but it's like, my home body scale is different than your home body scale, but I'm just using mine every day. I'm not comparing my numbers to your numbers, right? So I know if my body scale says, 2 pounds more, I can believe it. It may not be exactly 2 pounds, but it's more than I was yesterday, right? So when you're just comparing yourself, and we're not trying to compare against other people here, just like having consistent data. That's the other thing, though. It needs to be consistent. So if power meters, you do need to calibrate them depending on the power meter. You might need to calibrate it every day, but that only takes 5 seconds to calibrate a power meter. Some of them do it on the fly for you, so inquire about that, because you do want it to be accurate day to day, and they do fluctuate with temperature. So that's another reason why you want to calibrate.
I know we've gone down this rabbit hole about power meter and training, and I hope that you're getting something from it. And I know I have so many other more questions to ask, but I do believe, just off of my experience, there is some value in making sure that you have a power meter, because it will set you up for the greatest success, especially
Yeah.
with the biking being the longest portion of any triathlon distance, whether you're doing a sprint. Sprints, you use a different type of muscle. You're going at a faster pace, you're sprinting literally. And then you have the Olympic, you're using a different muscle there, but it's still kind of similar with the sprint, where you have to be able to be within that certain power range. And then when you get into the half distance, you get into more endurance. So you transition. So I think, with the right measures and the right tools with the power meter, that will help to set you up for the greatest success. So whatever it is that your goals are for this year, be sure to start with having a power meter and TrainingPeaks.
What I might also add, a lot of people have experience with power without having a power meter outdoors. They might have an indoor training, like a Wahoo or something, where they're actually leveraging watts and they're using Zwift and they're getting the concept, and they actually have wattage indoors, but they may not have it outdoors. So that's a great way to kind of like learn about it, and you might, again, like do some testing to get the concept of pacing. If you do your longer rides, 90 minutes or 2 hours or however long they might be, can you maintain a consistent pace throughout the entire workout? What was your first half average versus your second half average? And that's a concept known as decoupling. And when you have heart rate and power, and the longer you go at a particular power, inevitably your heart rate will rise. And so you start to look at different metrics and how they overlay with each other. But the number one thing is, can you maintain a consistent pace throughout your long rides, your indoor rides, for example?
I love, love, love that. So if you have a bike trainer, we just learned here, that's another way to at least start to begin to know how to ride with power and kind of get your rate of perceived exertion if you don't have a power meter to take it outside. So you kind of get a
Yeah.
feel of what it feels like in that
Yeah.
particular zone. You mentioned coaching and sitting down with coaching. I know that it is your passion and life's mission to make sure that people have access and deserve coaching. So let's talk a little bit about the coaching aspect and how having
Yeah.
the right coach can um, take you above average.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I suggest, if you're going to work with a coach, interview several coaches. It's more than the knowledge base that you're, quote, hiring, but like, how do you relate with that coach? Are you can you open up to that coach? Can you give them your true, feelings of how you felt that day? Or if things are going, you have a lot of stress in your life, are you comfortable talking to your coach about that? A lot of coaching is not just intervals and the prescribed workout, it's everything in between the workouts. A coach can help you set realistic goals. They can help you set habits that will become a better, a larger part of your life, that will create not only just becoming a faster athlete, but a healthier human being. And so there's a lot of life management skills that go into becoming a triathlete, a successful triathlete. So how do you manage work, family, triathlon? That's all important stuff. And it influences your workout. It influences your race. So we can't ignore it. So I think working one-on-one with the coach really becomes a very intimate kind of, you're certainly not in a real relationship like that, but it's about opening up to somebody that you can trust, that can help you through a lot of tough situations. So a lot of times they kind of become a psychologist as well, and oftentimes your spouse could care less about your workout, right? Like, but you're looking forward to talking about your workout, with your coach. So yeah, a really good coach, it's more than just the interval of the day there, and then they can adjust on the fly. They know that you're having a lot of stress, and without you knowing it, they might go into your future workouts and ratchet them back a bit, lower the volume. They just know you're going through some tough times, and so they can ease that off for you. But as well as they know when you're ready to do some more suffering, and things are going well, and they can ratchet it up as well at the right time. So that's where a training plan doesn't really hit the mark. A training plan is kind of the middle of the bell curve. So half the people it might be fine for, and half the people it's not great for. But a training plan is a great way to get some basic structure and some really good tips and some great workout ideas. And it might be perfect for you. I think the earlier you are in your career, the better training plan is, because consistency is number one. Just get yourself out the door is the number one goal. But as you progress, that's where personal training and a personal coach can make a lot of impact. And you might be just having the same recurring issues, but you don't know the underlying reason for it, but a coach might be able to get right to it.
That is so good. And I want to ask you, for those who might be listening, a little nervous about interviewing coaches because they don't know what to necessarily ask them, what would you
Yeah.
say would be the top 3 or 5 things they need to ask that coach?
Oh, probably get at, what's their communication style? How do they prefer to communicate? How often do they like to communicate? So obviously I'm talking here about, like premium one-on-one coaching. How often can you communicate with your coach? How do they prefer to communicate? Can you text them? And how often do they review your workouts? How often do they plan your workouts? You might even ask for referrals, or know of other athletes that they've worked with, and go interview those athletes and find out what experience they had with those coaches. I think, a good coach really, they need to stick to their word, whatever they promise, they need to follow through with. So if your race is this Sunday and the coach says, I'm going to call you Sunday night, they better darn call you Sunday night, to find out how it went. I'm not saying not every coaching service includes that though. So you need to decide, well, what level service am I looking for? Am I willing to pay for? And then does that coach actually follow through and give that level of service, that I'm paying for? So yeah, I think interviewing past clients is a really good way to go. And I think communication style is really key as well. The coach may know a whole lot, but maybe you guys just don't really hit it off. You want a coach that you're looking forward to talking to.
Right. That makes so much sense. And I never thought about interviewing their actual clients and getting their opinion about how and what they like about that particular coach. I think that's really, if they will divulge that information, or if you can figure it out and find it out, I think that would be a very smart way to go. So there's a
Yeah.
couple of different things that you guys can do to ask these questions, make sure you get them done. But I do want to just maybe piggyback on what Dirk is saying. Having a coach outside of a team environment can truly take your particular skill set to a new level. One thing about triathlon and being in this space is that we don't get comfortable with where we are. We are always constantly trying to improve. And so if that's you and you've never had an opportunity to get a coach, this is the year. Start your year off with a coach. Go to Training Peaks, find a plan, or they have I think on there where you can identify coaches. If you need to understand a coach, interview that coach, or use Google. Search for triathlon coaches, or go to USA Triathlon and look at their Find a Coach program, or Find a Coach section, to find somebody that will be good for you so that you can take your skills to the next level and just start to understand your data, understand how your body operates and works. And that's the best way. And it's good to be in a team environment, but also you want that specialized information so that you can kind of dial in on the things that you need to do so that it can take you to the next level. That was a lot of yous.
Yeah,
But
we have we have the coach match service within Training Peaks. So you can
yeah,
fill out, the questionnaire, and we have human beings that review those. We have human beings that actually will pair you. And then we'll give you, 3 options, and we invite you to interview and set up a phone call with each coach and then make a decision. But if you're not happy with that first decision, we're happy to help you find another one. So yeah, we have a 3-person team that's all they do is help athletes find the right coach.
wow. We've talked a lot today. We talked about how you got your start. We talked about you being a cyclist, having a one and done, first and last Ironman experience. And we talked about power and getting a power meter. But most importantly, we talked about coaching. And that's what it's all about. Thank you so much. I just want to brag on you a little bit because I want people to know that you're still out here racing in real life and doing big things. And then we have our fun part of our triad. And then we have our fun part of our segment called Rapid Fire. So after I brag on you a bit, we'll get into our rapid fire. Yep, you're not prepared for it. So that's
The
going
hot
to,
seat.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay. So Mr. Dirk Friel, who is the son of Mr. Joe Friel of all of the triathlon books, um, he comes from a great legacy, but he has his own legacy. He is a he was a pro cyclist. He was the 2017 Business Person of the Year out in Boulder, Colorado, doing big things. But he's still competing, y'all. He is still out there tearing up the what is it, the gravel. He's still out there cycling. He won the Steamboat Masters 100
Yes.
mile race. Yes, 100-mile race. He's also 2-time national champion in what they call ski mountaineering. So he is still holding that championship title. Dirk is still out here using Training Peaks himself. So why shouldn't you? Come on. This man has done amazing things and he's still using Training Peaks. I'm still using Training Peaks, and I'm still a beginner, I feel like, but we all can be continuously improving ourselves and trying new sports. Who's to say that multi-sport isn't going out and maybe doing cyclocross, or going out and doing gravel biking, or going out and doing endurance swims of 5 miles? There is so much that you can do. And I just wanted to kind of introduce you to Training Peaks because that's a platform that can help you conquer all of your goals. So thank you so much, Dirk, for being here with us.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to our rapid fire questions. I have to be kind of Ah, different with these rapid fire questions because you are a unique guest today. So, not our typical multi-sport athlete that's constantly in multi-sport. However, still, nonetheless, you're helping a lot of us multi-sport athletes conquer big things. So, first question.
Yeah.
Oh, I cracked myself up. First question is, out of swimming, ski mountaineering, and running, which would you say is your least favorite?
Oh, swimming.
Okay, that's good. Going back to your cycling days, what was your favorite post-race celebration ritual?
Wow. Probably just a big pizza. That's probably what I look forward to the most after really big races. And I think that brings back a strange memory. There was always a really hard race in New Mexico called the Tour of the Gila. And it was one of the hardest races. And we'd finish Sunday, and then we'd have to drive all the way back from Silver City, New Mexico to Boulder. And it takes like 12 hours. And we would just eat like Big Macs and Pringles. And that was the only day, the only time the entire season I would have either. It was like Big Macs and like entire box of whatever cylinder of Pringles. And that was very enjoyable. That was the only time I would do it in the entire season.
Okay, I love that. So now we're going back into cycling, whether it's your first Ironman or just cycling in general. Because if you're doing 100 miles on the bike, I'm sure time is important and time is of the
Yeah.
essence. So, do you pee on the bike or do you get off and take a proper pee break?
Proper, definitely, only unless only, and it doesn't even happen anymore. It's just when I was racing professionally. You know, you see the Tour de France guys do it. You know, they're on TV peeing, and hopefully the cameraman turns away when they realize it. But just in pro bike racing, you know, is like the only time that would occur.
That little mischievous smile on your face tells me something else, because the way you had to preface that, I was like, he ain't telling us the whole.
I'm just thinking back to like, yeah, those cold days in Belgium where it really didn't matter. It was just cold, rainy, nasty cobblestones. You're racing through muck and cow poo and everything. And sometimes just peeing in your shorts was enjoyable because it was warm. And that's how hard bike racing is in Belgium. Yes, that is like an enjoyable moment.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if I can come back and ask any other questions after that, especially having an enjoyable moment being when you pee on the bike out in Belgium. I love it. So, speaking of Belgium, where is your favorite place to cycle?
Ooh, wow. I love Italy. I love the Alps. I mean, in Italy, it's Tuscany, around Lucca, Italy, and then the Alps, just really anywhere up in the Alps, you know, is incredible. So those are probably my favorite places outside the United States.
Wow. Okay, this other question. I know you probably never realized that you would have such a thumbprint in the fabric of the multi-sport space, or for that point, any athletic space that uses TrainingPeaks. What is your proudest moment being the chief evangelist at TrainingPeaks?
Cool. Well, I mean, to be honest, like unfortunately, being a software company, you don't get to see your customers come through the front door. You know, that's the downside of having a software company, is not being able to interact with your customers really on a daily basis. other than through support. But when I get out to the races and you have a booth, you have a tent, or you run into people, just having that experience, and that those folks that say, hey, thanks, I've been using TrainingPeaks, like yourself, for however many years, and they accomplished their goals, and that's really the proudest moments, which are amazing. And I'd love to have more of them. And to get out to the races is really where that happens, and you get to meet your customers. So those are the hands down the proudest moments, I'd say. And it really is more proud to help kind of the beginners too, because it means more to them. A professional cyclist is told what to do. They're told to use TrainingPeaks, and oftentimes it's not like something that they really gravitate or seek out. But when you really help someone and they've come to you and looking for help, and you paired them with a coach and help them reach their goals, and you find out about it, that's definitely proudest moments.
And because I know this from previous conversations that we've had, I know you're a big music buff, and so am I.
Oh.
So who is your favorite artist, music artist?
Ooh. Oh man. Well, throughout my life, I've always just loved reggae. So I always have to say, I guess, Bob Marley.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite Bob Marley song?
I love Brown Sugar.
Oh.
So yeah, just love that vibe, and I started learning the bass a bit, just to play a little bit, some of the songs. So yeah, I guess that's that. And I love the blues, like Buddy Guy. I got to meet a couple years ago in his bar in Chicago. He's one of the last remaining, blues legends. Love going to blues bars in New York City. And yeah, so we don't have that in Colorado. So I love when I get a chance to go to a good blues club.
So it sounds like to me you like soul and rhythm. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Definitely the good, Rolling Stones have their DNA in the blues. And the Stones have a good blues album. I can't remember the name of it, but it just doesn't come across as like the Stones,
Right.
So I love that style.
And when you're out training currently, are you listening to music, podcast, or just silence, just letting the workout take you away?
I say most of the time silence. Just when I'm out training on the bike, just for safety reasons, really. Number one, I don't feel comfortable, not knowing what's coming up from behind or hearing, So, but when I do run, hike, sometimes, ski, a lot of times I listen to podcasts. So absolutely. I think, especially like in the car, it's probably 50-50, podcasts or music.
And what's your newest podcast that you're adding to your rotation?
Well, I love This Week in Startups. I just love the startup culture. I've been a mentor for startups in Techstars is an incubator, and they have a sports incubator in Indianapolis. So I've been a mentor for Techstars Indianapolis. So I love This Week in Startups with Jason Calacanis. And it's kind of like the news of the day, like the tech news of the day as well, which is really cool. And then on the fitness side, I've recently been catching up on Fast Talk Labs. They're here in Boulder. They've had a lot of great guests, and they're very, science oriented for cyclists. So they have a lot of great advice and a lot of great guests on Fast Talk Labs.
Well, what I was wanting you to say was that you're adding Try Beginner's Luck to your podcast list.
Well, I listened to Rocky, USA Triathlon CEO. So that was the last one I listened to.
Well, awesome. I'm so glad. So you have a couple of more to catch up, and then I love it. So thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for being here at Try Beginners Luck. Whenever you try Beginners Luck, you always win. Yes, this is season 2. We're kicking off season 2, but I'm still trying Beginners Luck, and I hope that you will keep trying with me on this journey. I'm Mashonda, and I'm out. Thank you for joining us.